A warm welcome to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Christmas came early for Britons this year as their leaders and those in the European Union were finally able to agree a trade deal that saves them from still remaining in the EU single market beyond December 31st. We'll be reviewing the deal as well as its timeline in a moment. We'll have legal practitioner Momo Kadiri join us later. But first, a quick check on other discussions in diplomatic circles. Last week, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Jeffrey Onyema, took a trip to Kingston, Jamaica, signaling Nigeria's relationship with the country just went up a notch after 50 years. Aboard this inaugural flight was the minister, as well as other senior government officials and members of the organized private sector. They were received at the Sangster International Airport, Montego Bay, by the Minister of Transportation of Jamaica and other top Jamaican government officials. During his visit to the country, he was hosted to a breakfast meeting by his Jamaican counterpart, the Honourable Kamina Johnson-Smith, where they discussed areas of cooperation between Nigeria and Jamaica, including collaboration between Nollywood and the Jamaican film industry. As part of his working visit, the minister visited the Nigerian High Commission, where he held a meeting with both the home-based officers and the local staff. He commended them on the impressive look of the mission generally and called on them to keep maintaining the mission the way they're doing and to continue to strive to improve Nigeria's image in Jamaica. Mr. Onyema visited the Heart Institute of the Caribbean, owned and operated by a Nigerian, Professor Ernest Chijoke Madu. He was also at the Bob Marley Memorial Center, guided by one of Bob Marley's relatives and tour guide Stéphane Lemaire. The minister rounded up his visit to Jamaica with a visit to the Jamaica Emancipation Park. Sad news from the diplomatic community as the former Nigerian ambassador to Mozambique, Matilda Kwashi, has died. She passed on in the early hours of Friday, December 18th, after a brief illness at the age of 72. Europe on Sunday launched a massive vaccination drive against the coronavirus, with pensioners and medics lining up to take the first shots. While Europe has some of the best resourced healthcare systems in the world, the sheer scale of the effort means some countries are calling on retired medics to help, while others have loosened rules for who is allowed to give the injections. With surveys pointing to high levels of hesitancy towards the vaccine in countries from France to Poland, leaders of the 27-country European Union are promoting it as the best chance of getting back to something like normal next year. Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, says COVID-19 will not be the last pandemic in the world, but warned the world must invest in preparedness capacities in coping with pandemic like this. Dr. Ghebreyesus was delivering a speech online to mark the first ever International Day of Epidemic Preparedness, which is set on December 27th every year by the United Nations General Assembly.
Any efforts to improve human health are doomed unless they address the critical interface between humans and animals and the existential threat of climate change that's making our Earth less habitable. History tells us that this will not be the last pandemic, and epidemics are a fact of life. But with investments in public health, supported by an all-of-government, all-of-society, One Health approach, we can ensure that our children and their children inherit a safer, more resilient, and more sustainable world.
Welcome back. Now, the historic deal between the EU and the UK is in hand, but it still has to be presented before the British Parliament and the EU Parliament. Let's take a more detailed look at this deal.
And ladies and gentlemen, at the end of a successful negotiations journey, I normally feel joy.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announcing the historic trade deal between Britain and the EU. The deal came just 7 days before Britain exits one of the world's biggest trading blocs in its most significant global shift since the loss of empire. The deal also averts a chaotic finale to the tortuous divorce that has shaken the 70-year project to forge European unity from the ruins of World War II. European Union Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier described the deal as a relief and that it was built around ambitious and equitable free trade and an unprecedented economic and social partnership. As for the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, it is the biggest trade deal yet.
And so I'm very pleased to tell you this afternoon that we have completed the biggest trade deal yet, worth £660 billion a year, a comprehensive Canada-style free trade deal between the UK and the EU, a deal that will protect jobs across this country, a deal that will allow goods, UK goods and components to be sold without tariffs and without quotas in the EU market, a deal which will, if anything, allow our companies and our exporters to do even more business with our European friends, and yet which achieves something that the people of this country instinctively knew was doable, but which they were told was impossible.
His announcement to the British people came just minutes after the European Union made known the news. According to the Prime Minister, from January 1st, 2021, Britain leaves the customs union and goes outside the single market. Plus, British laws will be made solely by the British Parliament, interpreted by UK judges sitting in UK courts, and the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice will come to an end. Leaders across the continent have reacted to the new agreement, welcoming it as progress for all EU citizens. European Council President Charles Michel and European Parliament President David Sassoli welcomed the deal on Twitter. French President Emmanuel Macron, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, even Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte all hailed the deal, saying the interests and rights of European businesses and citizens had been guaranteed. Britain's chief Brexit negotiator David Frost tweeted that both sides had worked tirelessly in challenging conditions to get the biggest and broadest trade deal in the world. Ms. von der Leyen later tweeted that it was worth fighting for this deal. The deal ends a process that began in June 2016 when Britain voted in a referendum to leave the EU. 3 prime ministers, hours on end on talks, rejected deals, celebrations and more negotiations. A miracle happens in the 11th hour. In the new deal agreed, there will be no extra charges or limits on the amount that can be traded between the UK and the EU from January 1st. But there will be extra checks at borders, such as safety checks and custom declarations, so businesses that rely on transported goods to and from the EU will need to be ready. As for services, including finance, which is very important to the UK economy, the situation is still slightly unclear. Services will lose their automatic right of access, but the UK says the agreement locks in market access across substantially all sectors. As for visas, UK nationals will be needing them for stays longer than 90 days in the EU, in the 180-day period, and there will be extra border checks for UK travellers. The EU pet passport will no longer be valid. Plus, British travellers will still be able to access emergency healthcare in the EU. European health insurance cards will remain valid until they expire, after which they will be replaced by a UK global health insurance card. And on fishing, which was the bane on which the agreement was finally made, the UK becomes an independent coastal state and can decide on access to its waters and fighting grounds. But EU boats will be able to fish in UK waters for some years to come, at least. Plus, 25% of the value of their current catch will now become available for UK fishing boats. But there will be a transition period of 5.5 years where that is phased in. On security, the UK will no longer have automatic access to key databases, but should be able to gain access upon request. And the UK will not be a member of Europol, the EU's law enforcement agency. but it will have a presence at its headquarters, similar to the arrangement the US currently has. Finally, concerning study, the UK will no longer participate in the Erasmus Exchange Programme, an EU scheme that helps students in other countries, and in its place will be a new scheme named after the mathematician Alan Turing.
Let's bring in Momo Kadiri, a UK lawyer, arbitrator and a mediator. He joins us now from London. Mr. Kadiri, thank you for joining us on Diplomatic Channel. And a Merry Christmas to you.
Wish you the same, Amarachi. Compliments of the season, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. What were your initial thoughts when you heard news about this deal between the UK and the EU?
It came as a pleasant surprise, especially given that the news about the deal broke just on the eve of Christmas. It came perhaps as a as they would say, a late Christmas present. And I think the prospect of a no deal was going to be very catastrophic, not only for the UK, but indeed for the EU, especially given that the EU is the UK's biggest trading partner. So I think overall, the news about the deal was very welcoming and indeed a pleasant surprise for all of us.
Going through, a summary of the deal, it's clear the UK does want out of the EU, but still it wants to maintain that relationship with the bloc, the economic bloc. And this can be a bit confusing, as they go ahead, as, the lines are still blurry now between the EU and the UK, where the EU stops and where the UK continues. Explain to us, how they could get through these muddy waters, as they try to get used to being on their own?
First of all, the point I have to make is that negotiating a trade deal is never an easy task. And clearly, one has to recognize that the referendum took place on the 23rd of June, 2016. And since then, the EU and the UK have been trying to negotiate a deal. Now, in terms of whether or not they will still continue their relationship, I think the fact that they now have a deal is a clear demonstration and a recognition of the fact that the UK values its trading relationship with the EU, and so does the EU value its trade relations with the UK. So I think whereas the UK wants to maintain its sovereignty and has indeed left the EU since the 31st of January 2020. But the reality is that both parties recognize the importance of having and indeed maintaining their trading relation. Hence, you have the deal.
And I see that concerning trade, there will be no extra charges or limits on the amount that can be traded between the UK and the EU from January 1st. How would this impact then on the thousands of trucks that are still waiting at, the French border, waiting to come into the UK, and at the other borders surrounding the UK?
I think there are two issues there regarding the deal itself. I think one of the most significant outcome of this deal is the free quota and tariff, which I think is a significant aspect of any trade deal. Now, in terms of the trucks and the pressure, if you like, at the various UK borders particularly, I think that might be linked to two factors. One is that, don't forget, as I mentioned before, the deal was struck right on the eve of Christmas and with only very few days before there was going to be no deal at all. So I think some of the movement around particularly around the UK border post has been down to the panic and indeed the fear that there might be no deal at all. Again, secondly, it could also be down to partly because of we are still in a pandemic and UK has just announced another lockdown. So I think a lot of people would have been very sort of skeptical, wanting to get out of the UK before either there was no deal or before the announcement of the lockdown. With the deal now in place, obviously, I think that panic and that pressure should now reduce significantly.
We'll take a short break now. Our conversation with Momo Kadiri continues after the break. Stay with us. With the UK now becoming independent of the EU, let's look at how that would also affect relations outside of the EU. For example, the United States, where President-elect Joe Biden has said the US will be giving more priority to the EU than the UK. They'd rather trade with a bloc than trade, they give more priority to a bloc than a single country. And, they've said this over time anyway. Even outgoing President Donald Trump did imply, even though the US would be the UK's closest trading partner, it would still be given priority to the EU.
Yes, I think that when President-elect Biden does become president and is indeed sworn in upon inauguration on 20th of January 2021, I think he has also made it clear, apart from what you alluded to right now, about giving priority to the EU. I think he's also been quoted to have said that he wants to concentrate on the domestic front in the US in terms of growing businesses. But I think in terms of the US-UK relations going forward, following the exit of Britain from the EU, is such that it has to be one that recognizes the historical as well as the political ties between both countries. And I think that, yes, naturally it would make sense for the US to say that they want to have a bigger priority given to the EU, because it makes natural sense, because the EU is a bigger trading bloc than, of course, than the UK. But I think that they will be in a position to strike a deal that would be suitable to not only the US, but also the EU as well as the UK, taking into consideration their historical as well as political and economic ties before now.
Yeah, just also wanted to point out that with Joe Biden, it also bordered on, the UK's decision with Northern Ireland, and President-elect Joe Biden himself is traditionally or historically an Irish himself. But we're staying with the impacts, though. Here in Africa, a single trading bloc goes into effect January 1st, the AFCFTA. How could this, how could relations between Africa and the UK be affected by Brexit, seeing that Africa is a potpourri of markets? You have those who, have more affiliations with the French, and, they're a bit, their rules are a bit different from those who did have affiliations with, the British. So how do you see, these trading blocs and these trading partners ironing out, the issues going forward and being able to have a smooth transition with the UK, especially as it leaves the EU?
I think if there is a simple way to describe it, is that we are up for some very interesting time, given, as you say, Africa now has a sort of a homogeneous trade arrangement between and indeed amongst its 55 member states. And as you said, is due to take place and come into effect from 1st January next year. Now, of course, you have Brexit having happened, and with the deal now struck between the UK and the EU, and of course, you've got President Biden hopefully being inaugurated in January next year. So that's all interesting mix. But I think the important thing that needs to be underlined is that as far as the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is concerned, is such that Africa, if you look at the objectives of AFTA, as we say, is such that it wants to make Africa a sort of integrated economy, whereby the various African states can have a common customs union and single, trading arrangement. So I think one of the interesting things is that it's going to be quite difficult in terms of implementation, because not only do you have so many countries, as I said, 55 member states, you also have about 8 at the very minimum, regional groupings, including ECOWAS, SADC, OHADA, and the rest of them. So like you mentioned, some of them are affiliated, their Francophone ones have their, affiliations, and so do you have the individual ones. So I think it's going to be very interesting. But the most important thing I want to say regarding Africa, in terms of how it relates with either the EU, the US, or indeed the UK, is that having come to the arrangement under the free trade arrangement in Africa at the moment, I think they need to allow some time for it to, in terms of implementation, to see how it works out, and for those various objectives to be achieved. And that would then give Africa, both in terms of individual states and collectively, a stronger bargaining power to reach out to reaching across the border to various other trade deals that they can do in the future.
Nigeria has one of the strongest markets in Africa, probably the only leading markets in Africa as it stands. How then does a country leverage, on what's going on with the divorce between the UK and the EU?
Nigeria is a strategic market, not only for the UK, but I think indeed for Africa and indeed for the entire world, for various reasons. But in terms of leveraging on Brexit and its peculiar relationship with the UK, I think Nigeria has a trade agreement already with the UK, and there are various bilateral efforts and initiatives between Nigeria and the UK. But above all, what I think Nigeria needs to do, if it must really sort of pull its weight, is to look inward. Nigeria needs to develop its infrastructure. Nigeria needs to deal with questions about, for example, security. Because once there is security, Nigeria has a domestic market already that is quite significant, that if Nigeria was able to tap into its own domestic market, it will become a natural proposition and attraction, not only to the UK, but to other markets. So I think Nigeria has to sort of deal with internal issues at the moment so that it becomes a more attractive market, both within Africa, to the UK, and indeed the rest of the world.
As we move on, though there is a deal now, still a lot of work has to be done. Parliament on both sides still has a lot to do. They have to go over the deal. The EU with its 27 member states, 26, I think, when the UK leaves. They all have to go through over this document. So does the UK Parliament have to go over this document and domesticate it? When does the real work of Brexit begin?
I think if you talk about the real work of Brexit, like I said, from 31st of January of this year, Brexit, as far as Brexiteers are concerned, Brexit has already happened. Now you have a trade deal on the back of that. So in terms of the real work, if you're talking about the deal particularly, is such that there are a number of transitional arrangements. For example, just take one of the sticking points, fisheries, UK fisheries, for example, where a 5.5-year transitional period has now been agreed, though I understand that the EU wanted 14 years transitional period. So with the zero tariffs and zero quotas, I think it's almost going to carry on as though things are still as normal before, as though UK will still have access to the common market. So I think overall, once Parliament, the House of Commons, is able to sit, I believe they are due to do that imminently. And of course, the EU does its own part as well. I think the deal will come into operation, and the rest will be something that parties will take time to work out the modalities, and it becomes operational. And I also believe that there are provisions for resolution of disputes in the future, and of course, there'll be provisions for future negotiations. So yes, I think given the limited timing, I think the most that could be done has already been done, and I think it's just a matter of Parliament ratifying it, and indeed the EU also doing the same for it to come into operation.
Well, we'll be watching from here, and we'll be reaching out to you, when the issues do come up, as they will, knowing that this is a divorce. Mr. Momo Kadiri, it's been a pleasure speaking with you on Diplomatic Channel. Thanks again.
Thank you, Amarachi. Thank you for having me.
This is where we end the program, our very last edition for the year 2020. It's been wonderful that you could join us. I hope to see you again in 2021. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Take care now.